There is a belief that most people carry with them for years, sometimes for their entire lives. And it is so deeply embedded in the way they think about success and progress that they never stop to question whether it is actually true. The belief is this: that discipline is something you either have or you do not. That somewhere out there are people who woke up one day and simply became disciplined, as if it were a switch that flipped, a threshold that was crossed, a permanent state that was achieved and never again had to be earned. And because they believe this, they spend their lives waiting for the morning when they will finally feel disciplined, waiting for the moment when everything clicks into place and the struggle disappears, waiting for some internal transformation that will make doing hard things feel easy, that will make consistency feel effortless, that will make them into the kind of person who just naturally does what needs to be done, without resistance, without hesitation, without the constant pull of distraction and comfort. But that morning never comes. That moment never arrives, and the waiting itself becomes the very thing that prevents them from building the discipline they are hoping to receive. This is the myth of discipline, and it is one of the most quietly destructive ideas that exists in the space of personal development. The myth says that discipline is a destination, that you work toward it, struggle with it, and then one day you arrive, and from that point forward, you are disciplined. You have it. It is yours, like a degree hanging on a wall or a trophy sitting on a shelf. It is a thing you possess, and once you possess it, the work is done. But discipline does not work that way. It has never worked that way. Discipline is not a place you arrive at. It is a path you walk, every single day, with no final destination. It is not a state of being. It is a state of doing. It is not something you become once. It is something you practice continuously. And the people you admire for their discipline, the people who seem to have it all together, who show up every day, who stay consistent when others fall off, they are not operating from some permanent reservoir of willpower that never runs dry. They are making a choice every single day. Sometimes every single hour, they are choosing to act in alignment with their goals, even when they do not feel like it. Especially when they do not feel like it. That is what discipline actually is. Not a feeling, not a personality trait, not a genetic gift. It is a practice, a daily, unglamorous, often uncomfortable practice of doing what matters even when every part of you would rather do what is easy. And once you understand this, once you truly let go of the fantasy that discipline is something you will one day magically possess, everything changes. Because you stop waiting. You stop looking for the right moment. You stop searching for the perfect conditions, and you start building. One action at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time. That is what we are going to explore together. Not a motivational speech designed to pump you up for an afternoon. Not a set of hacks or shortcuts that promise transformation without effort, but a real, honest, grounded understanding of what discipline is, how it works, and how you can build it into the fabric of your life in a way that is sustainable, practical, and lasting. Let us begin by addressing something that most people confuse with discipline, but is, in fact, one of the primary reasons they never develop it. Let us talk about motivation and why it is, by its very nature, designed to fail you. Motivation is a feeling. It is that surge of energy you get when you watch an inspiring video, read a powerful book, or have a late-night conversation with yourself about how things are going to change. It is the fire that burns in your chest on January 1st, when you write down your resolutions. It is the excitement of a new beginning, the thrill of possibility, the emotional high of imagining a better version of yourself. And in those moments, motivation feels unstoppable. It feels like you could do anything. It feels like this time, it is going to be different, and then it fades. It always fades, not because you are weak, not because you do not want it badly enough, but because motivation is an emotion, and emotions, by their very nature, are temporary. They rise and they fall. They surge and they recede. They are influenced by sleep, by stress, by weather, by hormones, by the random events of a Tuesday afternoon. You cannot build a life on something that changes with the wind. And yet, that is exactly what most people try to do. Think about the pattern. It is so common that it has become almost universal. You decide to make a change. Maybe you want to get in shape, or learn a new skill, or build a business, or improve your health. In the beginning, you are fueled by motivation. You feel energized. You are excited about the process. You go to the gym every day. You study with passion. You work on your project with intensity. For a week, maybe 2, maybe even a month, you are unstoppable, and then something happens. Or rather, nothing happens. The excitement wears off. The novelty fades. The results are not as fast as you expected. The work starts to feel repetitive. You have a bad day, and you skip a session. Then you skip another. Then a week goes by, and you realize you have not touched the project, have not gone to the gym, have not opened the book, and the guilt sets in. The frustration, the self-criticism. What is wrong with me? Why can I never stick with anything? Why do I always start and never finish? But the problem was never you. The problem was the fuel you were running on. Motivation is like a match. It burns bright, it burns hot, but it burns out quickly. And if you are depending on that match to keep a fire going all night, you are going to be left in the dark. What you need is not a brighter match. You need logs. You need kindling. You need a structure that sustains the fire long after the initial spark has died. That structure is discipline. And understanding the difference between motivation and discipline is not just an intellectual exercise. It is the single most important shift in perspective that separates people who achieve long-term results from people who remain stuck in the cycle of starting and stopping, enthusiasm and abandonment, hope and disappointment. Motivation asks, do I feel like doing this? Discipline asks, did I commit to doing this? Motivation depends on your emotional state. Discipline operates regardless of your emotional state. Motivation is concerned with how you feel right now. Discipline is concerned with where you want to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. This does not mean that motivation is useless. It is not. Motivation is a wonderful starting point. It is the spark that gets you moving. But it is only a starting point. The mistake is treating it as the engine. It is the ignition, not the fuel. It gets the car started, but it cannot keep it running. Discipline is the engine. Discipline is what keeps you moving on the days when the spark is gone, when the road is boring, when the destination feels impossibly far away. The most common trap that motivation sets is the belief that you need to feel ready before you act. This is a lie that sounds like wisdom. I will start when I feel motivated. I will work on it when the time is right. I will get back to it when I have more energy. These statements feel reasonable. They feel responsible, but they are simply excuses dressed in the language of self-awareness. Because the truth is, The right time rarely feels like the right time. Readiness is not a feeling that arrives. It is a decision that is made. And the people who wait until they feel ready are almost always the people who never begin. There is a subtle arrogance in the belief that you should only work when you feel inspired. It assumes that your feelings are reliable indicators of what you should do. But they are not. Your feelings are indicators of your current state, not your long-term best interest. You might feel like staying in bed, but your long-term best interest is served by getting up and training. You might feel like scrolling your phone for another hour, but your long-term best interest is served by sitting down and working on your project. The feeling says stop. The commitment says go. And discipline is the practice of honoring your commitment over your feeling. This does not mean ignoring your feelings entirely. Rest is important. Recovery is important. Listening to your body and mind is important. But there is a vast difference between genuine rest and habitual avoidance, between taking a deliberate day off to recover and skipping another day because you do not feel like showing up. Learning to distinguish between the two is part of developing discipline. And most of the time, if you are honest with yourself, you will know the difference. You will know whether you are resting or hiding. And discipline asks you to be honest with yourself about the answer. So if motivation is unreliable and discipline is what actually sustains long-term progress, the question becomes, how do you build discipline? How do you develop something that is not a feeling, not a surge of energy, but a pattern of behavior that holds up day after day, even when the excitement is gone? The answer is simpler than most people expect, and harder than most people want to hear. You build discipline through repeated action. That is it. Not through reading about discipline. Not through watching videos about discipline. Not through planning, strategizing, or thinking about what you will do someday. Through doing. Through the actual, physical, unglamorous act of showing up and performing the task you committed to, whether you feel like it or not. Every time you do something you committed to doing, especially when you do not feel like doing it, you are building discipline, not metaphorically, literally. You are strengthening the neural pathways associated with self-control, with delayed gratification, with the ability to override impulse in favor of intention. You are training your brain to follow through. And with each repetition, the resistance decreases slightly, not to zero, never to zero, but enough that the action becomes more natural, more automatic, and less dependent on willpower. This is why the size of the action matters far less than the consistency of the action. Most people make the mistake of starting too big. They commit to running 5 miles a day when they have not run in months. They commit to studying for 3 hours when they have been studying for 0. They set the bar so high that the only way to reach it is on a wave of motivation. And when that wave recedes, the bar feels impossibly out of reach. So they stop, and then they feel like failures, even though the failure was not in their character, but in their approach. Discipline is built in small increments. It is built by doing something small and doing it consistently. Not perfectly, consistently. If you want to develop a reading habit, you do not need to read for an hour a day. Read for 10 minutes every day, without exception. If you want to build a fitness routine, you do not need to crush yourself in the gym for 90 minutes. Do a 15-minute workout every day, without exception. If you want to develop a creative practice, you do not need to produce a masterpiece. Write 1 paragraph. Sketch 1 drawing. Practice one song, every day, without exception. The daily repetition is where the discipline lives, not in the grand gesture, not in the heroic effort, in the quiet, unglamorous act of showing up one more time, even when the results are not visible, even when no one is watching, even when the progress feels painfully slow, because it is slow. Real progress is almost always slow, and the people who succeed are not the ones who moved fastest. They are the ones who kept moving. There is a compounding effect to daily action that most people dramatically underestimate. A small action performed once is almost worthless. A small action performed every day for a year is transformative, not because any individual repetition is particularly impressive, but because the accumulation of those repetitions creates something far greater than the sum of its parts. Skills develop, knowledge deepens, habits form, identity shifts, and one day, you look back and realize that the distance between where you started and where you are now is enormous, even though the daily steps were small. This is the paradox of discipline. In the moment, it feels insignificant. Day to day, the changes are invisible. But over months and years, those invisible changes become undeniable. The problem is that most people quit during the invisible phase. They quit because they cannot see the progress, and they mistake the absence of visible results for the absence of progress. But the progress is happening. Beneath the surface, the work is accumulating. The foundation is being laid, and if they could just stay with the process a little longer, if they could just keep showing up through the period of apparent stagnation, they would begin to see what patience and consistency produce. Now let me tell you about someone whose story will sound familiar to many of you. We will call her Priya, and her story is not about failure. It is about something more subtle and more common than failure. It is about delay, about the quiet, comfortable trap of waiting for the perfect conditions that never arrive. Priya was an intelligent and capable woman in her early 30s. She had ambitions, real ones. She wanted to write a book. She had wanted to write it for nearly 5 years. She had the ideas. She had the talent. She had done enough reading and studying to understand the craft. She knew more about writing than many people who had already published. But Priya had not written the book. She had not written a single chapter. She had not even written a complete first draft of the opening paragraph, at least not one that she kept. Every time Priya sat down to write, the same pattern repeated itself. She would open her laptop, stare at the blank page, write a few sentences, read them back, decide they were not good enough, delete them, and close the laptop. Then she would tell herself, I just need more time. I need a clearer head. I need to feel inspired. I will try again this weekend. I will try again next month. I will try again when things calm down. But things never calmed down. Life never presented her with the perfect, interruption-free window of creativity she was waiting for. There was always something. Work was stressful. Her apartment was noisy. She was tired. She did not feel ready. She had an argument with a friend that rattled her focus. She read an article by a more successful writer and felt inadequate. There was always a reason to wait, and Priya was, without realizing it, a collector of reasons. She subscribed to newsletters about writing. She bought books about the creative process. She followed authors on social media and studied their routines. She talked about her book with friends, describing the plot, the characters, the themes, with such vivid detail that people assumed she was already deep into the writing process. But she was not. She was preparing to write. She was researching how to write. She was learning about writing. She was doing everything related to writing, except the actual writing. This is a pattern that extends far beyond writing. It appears in fitness, in business, in education, in creative pursuits, in virtually every area where discipline is required. It is the pattern of preparation without execution, research without action, planning without implementation, and it is driven, almost always, by the same underlying belief that the right conditions must be in place before the work can begin. For Priya, the right conditions meant feeling inspired. She believed that real writing, good writing, could only happen in a state of creative flow, when the words came easily and the ideas felt clear. She associated quality with ease, and because the act of writing was rarely easy, she concluded, unconsciously, that the quality would not be there, so she should wait. But this belief was wrong, and it was wrong in a way that cost Priya years of potential growth, because the truth about creative work and about disciplined work of any kind is that it rarely feels the way you think it should. The professionals who produce great work do not wait for inspiration. They sit down and work, and sometimes the inspiration shows up, and sometimes it does not, but the work gets done regardless. The first drafts are often terrible. The early versions are rough, clumsy, and embarrassing, but they exist. They are on the page. They can be edited, revised, and improved. A bad page can be made better. A blank page cannot be made into anything. Priya did not realize that she was caught in a cycle. Each time she waited for the right conditions, the act of not writing reinforced a subtle but powerful message to her subconscious. You are not someone who writes. Each day that passed without writing made the next day of not writing feel more natural. The inaction was becoming a habit, just as action becomes a habit. And with each passing month, the gap between who Priya wanted to be and who she was actually being grew wider, and the discomfort of that gap grew deeper. She began to notice something troubling. Other people she felt were no more talented than her, were publishing. They were sharing their work. They were building audiences. They were living the creative life she dreamed about. And when she looked at what separated them from her, she could not point to talent, or intelligence, or resources. What separated them was one thing: they did the work. They showed up. They wrote on days when they did not feel like writing. They wrote badly and kept going. They did not wait for the perfect conditions. They created imperfect work under imperfect conditions and improved it over time. This realization did not come as a single, dramatic epiphany. It came as a slow, building pressure, a quiet accumulation of evidence that could no longer be ignored. Priya was not being held back by a lack of talent. She was being held back by a lack of action. And the lack of action was caused by a dependency on motivation, on feeling ready, on waiting for a state of mind that was never going to arrive on its own. The most painful part of Priya's story is not that she failed. She did not fail. She never got far enough to fail. The most painful part is that she never gave herself the chance to succeed. She never found out what she was capable of, because she never put herself in the position to discover it. And that is what waiting does. It does not protect you from failure. It protects you from everything, including the possibility of becoming who you were meant to be. We will return to Priya later and see what happened when something finally shifted. But for now, let her story sit with you. And ask yourself honestly, where in your own life are you waiting for conditions that are never going to arrive? Where are you preparing without acting? Where are you letting the comfort of delay rob you of the growth that can only come from doing? Now let us explore something that goes even deeper than action and habit. Let us talk about the relationship between identity and discipline, because what you do consistently is not just a matter of willpower. It is a matter of who you believe yourself to be. There is a layer beneath behavior that most people never examine. It is the layer of identity, the internal story you tell about who you are, what kind of person you are, and what kind of things people like you do. This identity layer is extraordinarily powerful because it operates largely outside of conscious awareness, yet it shapes nearly every decision you make. Your behaviors tend to align with your identity, not always perfectly, but with remarkable consistency over time. You tend to act in ways that are congruent with how you see yourself. Consider a simple example. If you believe deep down that you are not a morning person, you will find it extraordinarily difficult to wake up early, no matter how many alarm strategies you try. The behavior of waking up early conflicts with the identity of being a non-morning person, and identity almost always wins. But if you begin to shift that identity, if you start telling yourself, "I am becoming someone who wakes up early," and you begin acting in ways that support that narrative, something interesting happens. The behavior starts to feel less like a battle and more like an expression of who you are. You are not fighting against yourself anymore. You are becoming yourself. This is the deep secret of sustainable discipline. It is not about forcing yourself to do things that conflict with who you believe you are. It is about reshaping who you believe you are, so that disciplined action becomes a natural extension of your identity. When your identity says, "I am the kind of person who shows up," showing up stops being a struggle and starts being a default. When your identity says, "I am someone who follows through on commitments," following through requires less effort because it aligns with how you see yourself. The question then becomes, how do you change your identity? And the answer is beautifully circular through action. Your identity is not fixed. It is not determined at birth. It is built over time through the accumulation of evidence. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. When you go for a run, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who exercises. When you sit down and write, you are casting a vote for the identity of a writer. When you keep a promise to yourself, you are casting a vote for the identity of someone who is reliable, who has integrity, who does what they say they will do. No single vote is decisive. One trip to the gym does not make you an athlete. One page of writing does not make you an author. But as the votes accumulate, the majority begins to shift. You start to see yourself differently. And as your self-image changes, your behavior follows, because you are now acting from a new identity rather than against an old one. This is why the small daily actions we discussed earlier are so much more important than they appear. They are not just building a habit, they are building an identity. Every small act of discipline is a brick in the foundation of a new self-concept. And once that foundation is strong enough, the person standing on it does not need to summon willpower for every decision. They simply do what people like them do. Think about the most disciplined people you know. They do not appear to be in constant struggle. They do not seem to be fighting themselves at every turn. They simply go about their routines with a kind of quiet certainty. And the reason is not that they have more willpower than you. It is that their identity has aligned with their actions. They see themselves as disciplined people, and so they act accordingly. The discipline is not layered on top of who they are. It is woven into who they are. You can begin this shift right now, not by trying to overhaul your entire life, but by paying attention to the way you describe yourself. The words you use about yourself matter more than you might think. When you say, "I am lazy," you are casting a vote for an identity that will produce lazy behavior. When you say, "I am working on becoming more consistent," you are casting a vote for an identity that supports consistency. The shift in language may seem trivial, but it reflects a shift in self-concept that, over time, becomes a shift in behavior. Start with the smallest possible identity. Claim that you can support with action. If you want to become someone who reads, do not say, "I am a voracious reader." That is too far from your current reality, and your brain will reject it. Say, "I am someone who reads a few pages every day," and then read a few pages every day. As the evidence accumulates, the identity will grow naturally. You will not need to force it. It will simply become true, because you have made it true through repeated action. This is the relationship between identity and discipline. They are not separate. They feed each other. Action shapes identity. Identity sustains action, and together, they create a cycle of consistency that does not depend on motivation, inspiration, or willpower. It depends on something far more durable: the quiet, steady belief that this is who you are. And that belief is built one choice at a time. Now let us get practical. Let us talk about how to build habits that last, because habits are the infrastructure of discipline. If discipline is the engine, habits are the tracks on which the engine runs, and the better you build those tracks, the smoother and more effortless the journey becomes. A habit, at its most basic level, is a behavior that has been repeated so many times that it becomes automatic. You do not have to think about brushing your teeth in the morning. You do not consciously decide to lock the door when you leave the house. You do not debate whether to put on your seatbelt when you get in the car. These actions happen without deliberation because they have been repeated so frequently that they have moved from the conscious mind to the automatic systems of the brain. They are habits, and the remarkable thing about habits is that they require almost no willpower to maintain. Once a behavior has become a habit, it runs on autopilot. This is why building the right habits is one of the most powerful things you can do for your discipline. Because when the behaviors you want to perform consistently become habitual, you no longer need to summon motivation or willpower to do them. They simply happen. The struggle is not gone entirely, especially in the early stages, but it is dramatically reduced. And this means that the energy you would have spent fighting yourself can be directed elsewhere, toward growth, creativity, and the higher-order challenges that actually require conscious thought. So how do you build a habit? The process is well understood by behavioral psychologists, and it rests on a few key principles. The first principle is simplicity. The behavior you are trying to make habitual must be simple enough that you can do it even on your worst day. This is not about setting the bar low permanently. It is about setting the bar low initially so that the pattern of showing up becomes established before you increase the difficulty. If your goal is to exercise daily, the initial habit might be putting on your workout clothes and doing 5 minutes of movement. That is it. Not an hour, not 30 minutes, 5 minutes. The purpose of this initial simplicity is to remove every possible barrier to consistency. You want to make it so easy that it feels almost ridiculous not to do it. Because the goal at this stage is not to get fit. The goal is to become someone who exercises every day. The fitness will come later. Right now, the identity is being formed. The second principle is anchoring. A habit forms more easily when it is attached to something that already exists in your routine. This is sometimes called habit stacking, and it works by linking the new behavior to an established one. After I pour my morning coffee, I will write for 10 minutes. After I sit down at my desk, I will review my most important task. After I brush my teeth at night, I will read for 10 minutes. The existing habit becomes a trigger for the new one, creating a natural progression that makes the new behavior feel like a logical next step, rather than an isolated effort. The third principle is repetition. This is the most important and the least exciting. A habit becomes automatic through sheer repetition. There is no shortcut. Some research suggests that it takes an average of 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic, though the range varies widely depending on the behavior and the individual. The point is that habit formation is a process that takes time. Weeks, not days. And during that time, you are essentially running on manual mode, consciously choosing to perform the behavior until your brain takes over and starts doing it automatically. This is where many people give up. The first few weeks of a new habit feel effortful and unrewarding. You are doing the work, but the behavior still requires conscious thought. It has not become automatic yet. It still feels like something you have to do, rather than something you simply do. And because it still feels like effort, it is tempting to conclude that it is not working. But it is working. The neural pathways are forming. The pattern is being established. The habit is being built, even though you cannot feel it yet. You just need to stay with it long enough for the automation to kick in. The fourth principle is environment design. Your environment has a far greater influence on your behavior than your willpower does. If you want to read more, put a book on your pillow so you see it before bed. If you want to eat healthier, stock your kitchen with healthy food and remove the junk. If you want to work out in the morning, lay out your clothes the night before, so that getting dressed for the gym is the path of least resistance. Design your environment so that the right behavior is easy and the wrong behavior is hard. Do not rely on your future self to make good decisions in the moment. Set up the conditions in advance so that the good decision is the obvious one. There is one more element of habit formation that is often overlooked, but critically important: forgiveness. You are going to miss a day. Probably more than one. Life will intervene. Illness will come. Emergencies will happen. You will simply forget. And when that happens, the most important thing you can do is not beat yourself up, but get back on track the next day. Missing one day does not destroy a habit. Missing 2 in a row starts to. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to never miss twice. 1 miss is an accident. 2 misses is the beginning of a new pattern. So when you slip, acknowledge it, let go of the guilt, and show up the next day as if nothing happened. That is discipline. Not never falling, but always getting back up. Now let us talk about something that is essential to any genuine practice of discipline, but is rarely addressed honestly. Let us talk about resistance and discomfort, because if you are going to build a disciplined life, you need to understand that resistance is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that something is happening. Every time you try to do something that is good for you, but difficult, you will feel resistance. This resistance can take many forms. It might be physical, like the heaviness in your body when the alarm goes off early. It might be mental, like the voice in your head that says you can skip today, that one day will not matter, that you deserve a break. It might be emotional, like the anxiety that arises when you sit down to work on something that stretches your abilities. Whatever form it takes, resistance is universal. It visits every person who tries to grow, and the way you relate to it determines whether you move forward or stay stuck. Most people interpret resistance as a signal to stop. They feel the discomfort, and they retreat. They assume that the discomfort means they are doing something wrong, or that they are not ready, or that this particular pursuit is not meant for them. But this interpretation is fundamentally mistaken. Resistance is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that you are at the edge of your comfort zone, and the edge of your comfort zone is exactly where growth happens. Think about physical training. When you lift a weight that challenges your muscles, you feel discomfort. That discomfort is not a sign that your body is breaking down. It is a sign that your muscles are being stressed in a way that will cause them to adapt and grow stronger. If you only lifted weights that felt comfortable, your muscles would never grow. The growth comes from the discomfort. The adaptation is triggered by the stress. The same principle applies to discipline, to mental effort, to emotional courage, and to any form of personal development. Growth requires discomfort, not suffering, not punishment, but the kind of productive discomfort that comes from doing something that is slightly beyond what you are currently capable of or comfortable with. And the disciplined person is not someone who no longer feels this discomfort. They are someone who has learned to act in spite of it. This is one of the most important distinctions in the entire conversation about discipline. The disciplined person feels resistance. They feel the pull of the warm bed. They feel the urge to procrastinate. They feel the temptation to take the easy road. They are not immune to these feelings, but they have developed the ability to notice the feeling, acknowledge it, and then act according to their commitment rather than their comfort. This ability is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. Every time you feel resistance and act anyway, you are strengthening your capacity to tolerate discomfort. You are expanding your tolerance band, the range of discomfort you can endure while still functioning effectively. And as that band expands, things that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable. Challenges that once stopped you in your tracks become routine obstacles that you navigate without drama. This does not mean you should ignore pain or push through genuine signals of burnout. There is a difference between productive discomfort and destructive strain, and learning to distinguish between them is part of developing wisdom alongside discipline. Productive discomfort is the feeling of doing something hard that you know is good for you. Destructive strain is the feeling of pushing so hard that you are damaging your health, your relationships, or your mental well-being. The former is to be embraced, the latter is to be respected and responded to with rest and adjustment. But for most people, most of the time the resistance they feel is not a signal of destruction. It is a signal of growth trying to happen. And the habit of pushing through that resistance, gently, consistently, without drama, is one of the most valuable capacities a human being can develop. One powerful way to handle resistance is to expect it. Do not be surprised when it shows up. Do not be offended by it. Do not interpret it as a personal failing. Expect it the way you expect gravity. It is a force that exists. It will pull you toward ease and away from effort. And knowing that it is coming allows you to prepare for it rather than being ambushed by it. Another powerful approach is to separate the decision from the feeling. When resistance arises, your feeling says, "I do not want to do this." But your decision, the commitment you made to yourself, says, "I am going to do this." Let the decision lead. Let the feeling exist without giving it authority. You can feel reluctant and still act. You can feel tired and still show up. You can feel uncertain and still move forward. The feeling and the action do not have to agree. And the moment you realize this, you have unlocked a level of freedom that most people never access. Discipline, at its core, is the ability to act independently of your current emotional state. It is the ability to honor your long-term commitments, even when your short-term feelings are pulling you in the opposite direction. And that brings us naturally to the next essential element of discipline, which is long-term thinking. Most of the decisions that undermine discipline are short-term decisions. They are decisions that prioritize immediate comfort over future benefit. The decision to hit snooze instead of waking up early prioritizes the comfort of the moment over the goals you set the night before. The decision to scroll your phone instead of working on your project prioritizes instant stimulation over long-term progress. The decision to eat the thing you know is not good for you prioritizes the pleasure of the bite over the health of the body over time. These decisions feel rational in the moment because the immediate reward is certain and tangible, while the long-term reward is abstract and distant. Your brain is wired to prefer certainty and immediacy. This is an ancient feature of human neurology that served your ancestors well when survival was uncertain and opportunities for food and rest were scarce. But in the modern world, where long-term goals often require the consistent sacrifice of short-term pleasures, this wiring works against you. The practice of long-term thinking is the practice of consciously overriding this default wiring. It is the practice of keeping your future self in mind when your present self is making decisions, and it is one of the most defining characteristics of disciplined people. Long-term thinkers do not ignore the present. They are not suffering through every moment, sacrificing all pleasure for some distant payoff. They simply have a clear picture of where they want to be, and they use that picture to inform their daily choices. When faced with a decision between what is easy now and what is beneficial later, they have a framework for choosing. They ask, which choice brings me closer to where I want to be? And they let that question, not their current feeling, guide the decision. This is what delayed gratification really means. It does not mean denying yourself pleasure. It means choosing the greater pleasure of long-term achievement over the lesser pleasure of short-term comfort. It is not a sacrifice. It is a trade. And when you are clear about what you are trading toward, the trade feels not only reasonable, but empowering. One of the most powerful tools for long-term thinking is clarity of vision. If you do not know where you want to be in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, then every decision is made in a vacuum. There is no future self to consider, no destination to navigate toward. But when you have a clear, vivid picture of the life you are building, every daily decision gains context. The morning workout is not just a workout. It is a step toward the strong, healthy body you are building over time. The evening study session is not just another session. It is a brick in the professional competence you are constructing. The moments of saying no to distractions are not deprivations. They are investments in a future that matters to you. Take the time to develop this clarity, not a vague wish, not a general aspiration, but a detailed, specific picture of what you are working toward and why it matters to you. Write it down. Revisit it regularly. Let it become a living document that evolves as you grow, and use it daily as the compass that guides your decisions. Because discipline without direction is just grinding. Discipline with direction is purpose, and purpose makes the discomfort not only tolerable, but meaningful. The relationship between discipline and time is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of the entire conversation. People want fast results. They want to see the payoff quickly. And when the payoff does not come in the first week, the first month, or even the first several months, they lose faith. They assume that something is wrong, that the approach is not working, that they should try something else. But what they fail to see is that the most valuable outcomes in life are always the result of accumulated effort over extended periods of time. Health is built over years of consistent care. Skills are built over years of consistent practice. Wealth is built over years of consistent financial discipline. Relationships are built over years of consistent presence and attention. The results you want are on the other side of the consistency you have not yet demonstrated, and the bridge between where you are and where you want to be is built not by occasional heroic efforts, but by daily, ordinary, unremarkable acts of discipline that, compounded over time, produce extraordinary outcomes. Trust the process, even when you cannot see the results, especially when you cannot see the results. Now let us talk about something that acts as both a comfort and a challenge for people who are trying to build discipline. Let us talk about the principle of consistency over perfection. There is a particular trap that catches ambitious people, people who care about quality, who have high standards, who genuinely want to do their best. The trap is perfectionism masquerading as discipline. It sounds like discipline. It looks like discipline. It even feels like discipline. But it is something else entirely. It is a form of avoidance. Because perfectionism, at its core, is the fear of being judged for imperfect work. And when that fear runs the show, it does not produce excellence. It produces paralysis. The perfectionist does not skip work because they are lazy. They skip work because the gap between what they want to produce and what they are currently capable of producing feels unbearable. They would rather do nothing than do something that does not meet their standard. And so they wait, polish, plan, prepare, and never actually ship, never actually finish, never actually put themselves on the line. Their standard becomes a shield, and that shield, while it protects them from criticism, also protects them from growth. Discipline, real discipline, is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It is about showing up and doing the work, even when the work is not your best, even when it is sloppy, incomplete, or embarrassing, even when it falls short of what you hoped. Because the work you do imperfectly today teaches you something that the work you do not do at all never can. And over time, consistent imperfect effort produces results that sporadic perfect effort never will. Consider two people pursuing the same goal. The first person works only when conditions are perfect, when they feel inspired, when they have enough time, when the quality they can produce meets their standard. They produce excellent work, but they produce it rarely. Maybe once a month, maybe less. The second person works every day, regardless of conditions. Their work is often mediocre. Sometimes it is genuinely bad, but they do it every day, without exception. After a year, who has grown more? Who has more experience? Who has more material to refine, more mistakes to learn from, more momentum carrying them forward? The answer is obvious, and it illustrates a truth that perfectionists find deeply uncomfortable. Volume beats quality in the early stages of any discipline. Not because quality does not matter, but because quality is a product of volume. You get better by doing more, not by doing less more perfectly. There is a famous study involving pottery students that illustrates this beautifully, and though variations of this story have been told many times, its lesson remains powerful. One group of students was told they would be graded solely on the quantity of pots they produced. The more pots, the better the grade. Another group was told they would be graded on the quality of a single pot, the best one they could produce. At the end of the semester, the group graded on quantity had produced not only more pots, but better pots. Because in the process of making pot after pot, they had gained experience, learned from mistakes, refined their technique, and developed skills that the quality group, sitting and theorizing about the perfect pot, had never had the chance to develop. This is the power of consistency over perfection. The consistent practitioner improves because they are always in the arena. They are always getting feedback. They are always adjusting. The perfectionist, by contrast, spends most of their time on the sidelines, waiting for the moment when they can perform flawlessly. But that moment does not exist. And the longer they wait for it, the further they fall behind the person who started messy and improved along the way. So give yourself permission to be imperfect. Give yourself permission to produce work that is not your best. Give yourself permission to have bad days, off days, days when the effort feels flat and the results feel mediocre. Those days count. They count because you showed up. They count because you maintained the streak. They count because the practice happened, and the practice, not the quality of any single session, is what builds discipline over time. The goal is not to have a perfect day. The goal is to have a consistent life. And a consistent life is made up of many imperfect days strung together by the simple decision to keep going. Now let me return to Priya, because her story does not end in the waiting. It ends with a shift, a quiet, unspectacular, deeply important shift that changed everything. Priya's turning point did not come in a dramatic flash. There was no sudden breakthrough, no life-altering event, no mentor who appeared with the perfect words at the perfect time. It came instead as a slow realization, built over months of frustration, that the approach she had been using was never going to work. She was never going to feel ready. She was never going to have the perfect morning of inspiration that would carry her through an entire book. The conditions she was waiting for did not exist and never would. And so, one evening, tired and uninspired, and not at all in the mood to write, Priya sat down at her kitchen table and made a decision. She was not going to write a book that night. She was not going to produce a masterpiece. She was going to write 200 words, just 200, about anything. It did not have to be good. It did not have to be part of the final book. It just had to exist. She wrote 212 words that night. They were clumsy. They did not flow. She would not have shown them to anyone, but they were on the page. And for the first time in years, Priya had not just thought about writing or talked about writing or prepared to write. She had written. The next evening, she did it again, 200 words, then the next evening, and the next. She set no other rules. She did not commit to a specific time. She did not create an elaborate writing space. She simply committed to 200 words a day, every day, no matter what. On days when she was tired, she wrote tired. On days when she felt uninspired, she wrote uninspired. On days when the words felt forced and flat and lifeless, she wrote them anyway. Something began to change. Not the quality of the writing at first, though that came later. What changed first was the resistance. After about 3 weeks, the act of sitting down to write no longer felt like climbing a mountain. It felt like sitting down. The decision had been automated. The habit was forming. The neural pathways were being laid down. The identity was shifting. She was no longer someone who wanted to write. She was someone who wrote, every day, not a lot, not beautifully, but consistently. After 2 months, she increased her minimum to 400 words. After 4 months, to 600. The writing was getting better because she was writing more. And writing more was giving her the practice she had denied herself for 5 years. She was learning through doing what she could never have learned through preparing. She was discovering her voice, not by waiting for it to arrive, but by using it, roughly and imperfectly, until it began to take shape on its own. After 8 months, Priya had a complete first draft of her book. It was rough, it needed substantial revision, but it existed, it was real. She could hold it in her hands and feel the weight of those hundreds of daily sessions, those thousands of small, imperfect, disciplined acts, accumulated into something tangible and meaningful. And when she looked back at what had made the difference, it was not talent, it was not inspiration, it was not some secret technique. It was the decision to stop waiting and start doing. It was the commitment to 200 words, a commitment so small that her perfectionist mind could not argue with it. It was the willingness to be bad at something she cared about, for as long as it took, until she got better. It was discipline, not discipline as a dramatic, forceful, white-knuckle endeavor, but discipline as a quiet, daily, sustainable practice that, over time, produced something extraordinary out of something ordinary. Priya's story is available to you. Not her specific story, but the principle underneath it. The principle that says, you do not need to overhaul your life to become disciplined. You need to start, small, imperfect, today, and then you need to do it again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Not because each individual day matters dramatically on its own, but because the chain of days, the unbroken continuity of showing up, is what transforms intention into reality. Now let us bring everything we have discussed together and close with a reflection on what discipline, practiced daily, truly means for the life you are building. You have heard a great deal in our time together, and if you are like most people, some of it resonated deeply, and some of it challenged beliefs you have held for a long time. Both responses are valuable. Resonance tells you that you are ready to act on what you heard. Challenge tells you that something inside you is being stretched, and stretching, as we have discussed, is how growth happens. The core message of everything we have explored is deceptively simple. Discipline is not a destination. It is a practice. It is not something you achieve once and then possess forever. It is something you do, every day, through the choices you make, the habits you build, and the identity you reinforce through action. It is not glamorous. It is not exciting. It does not make for a dramatic story most of the time. It is quiet. It is steady. It is repetitive. And it is the most powerful force available to any human being who wants to build a life of meaning, purpose, and genuine achievement. You do not need to wait for motivation. Motivation is a guest. It visits when it pleases and leaves when it chooses. You cannot build a house with a guest. You build a house with a resident, and discipline is the resident. It is there when the weather is bad. It is there when the work is boring. It is there when the results are invisible. It does not need to feel inspired to show up. It shows up because it committed to showing up. That is all. You do not need to be perfect. Perfection is a mirage. It shimmers on the horizon, always just out of reach, always receding as you approach it. If you chase perfection, you will spend your life running and never arriving. But if you chase consistency, you will look back after a year, after 5 years, after a decade, and be astonished by how far you have come. Not because any single step was impressive, but because you never stopped taking steps. You do not need to transform overnight. The pressure to change everything at once is a trap. It leads to burnout, to disappointment, and to the conclusion that change is too hard. But change is not too hard. Too much change at once is too hard. The right amount of change, applied consistently, is entirely manageable. Start small. Start so small that it feels almost silly. And then stay there until the habit is solid, the identity is forming, and the behavior is automatic. Only then, from that stable foundation, add more. You will face resistance. Every day, in some form, resistance will appear. It will whisper that today does not matter. It will suggest that you have earned a break. It will argue, persuasively, that the comfortable choice is the smart choice, and you will have to answer it. Not with anger, not with aggression, not with some battle cry of self-punishment, but with quiet, steady resolve. I hear you, I understand, and I am going to do this anyway. That is discipline speaking, and with practice, that voice gets louder while the voice of resistance gets softer. Not silent, never entirely silent, just softer. Easier to override, easier to smile at and move past. Your identity will shift. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. With each day of showing up, each act of following through, each moment of choosing the harder, right over the easier wrong. You are casting a vote for the person you are becoming, and at some point, perhaps sooner than you think, you will realize that the struggle has changed. You are no longer trying to become disciplined. You are simply living as someone who is. Not because the struggle disappeared, but because the practice became so woven into the fabric of your days that it stopped feeling like something separate from who you are and started feeling like the most natural expression of who you have become. That is the promise of discipline practiced daily. Not a life free of difficulty, not a life without resistance, failure, or setback, but a life in which you have a reliable, sustainable, deeply personal system for moving forward regardless of what comes. A life in which progress is not dependent on mood, on circumstance, or on anyone else's approval. A life built on the most solid foundation available to a human being, the simple, repeated, unshakable act of showing up. Because discipline is not a moment. It is a practice. It is not an event. It is a lifestyle. It is not something you achieve. It is something you live. And it begins, as it always does, with one choice, made today, and made again tomorrow, and again and again. Not because it is easy, because it matters, and because you are building something that lasts.